It was early in the morning on Wednesday, April 11th, 1934 in Ghent, Belgium, and Van Volsum, the sexton of St. Bavo's Cathedral, had just gotten to work. As sexton, Van was the church's primary caretaker, and he took his job very seriously. That morning, he walked the halls and chapels of the cathedral, inspecting them for anything that needed to be cleaned or repaired. But as the minutes ticked by, everything seemed to be in perfect order. Or so he thought. Hours into his shift, Van noticed that the lock that usually secured the doors of WWII's chapel had been forced open, and one of the doors was slightly ajar. Heart pounding, he pushed through the old wooden doors to discover a horrific crime scene the likes of which Belgium had never seen before or since. But the dismembered victim waiting for Van was not a person. It was a painting. It was a 500-year-old altarpiece, a polyptych oil painting that was composed of 12 huge panels that fit together into one enormous piece of art. And now, it was missing 2 of those enormous panels. Sitting in their place was a small note scrawled in French. Taken from Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. But this wasn't the first time this historic artwork was stolen. In fact, over the 591 years that it's existed, the Ghent Altarpiece has been involved in a total of 7 major art thefts, making it, officially, the most stolen painting in history. But what happened to the Ghent Altarpiece? And what made it important or alluring enough in the first place to end up being stolen by not just anyone, but by historical figures as infamous as Napoleon or Hitler? And most importantly, being the crown jewel of Belgium for nearly half a millennia, why was a stolen wheel of cheese prioritized over finding it? Actually, most importantly, where is the stolen panel now? Because although we have clues, a deathbed confession, and even what some have speculated are coded messages from the thief himself about its hiding place, it's been 91 years and we still haven't found the missing panel. Yet. Who knows, maybe someone watching this will change that. Welcome to the biggest cold case in art history, the mystery of the Ghent Altarpiece. Now, before we get into it, I gotta give you the lowdown on what exactly was stolen here and why it was and is such an incredibly huge deal. See, the Ghent Altarpiece is huge. To be a little more precise, the 12 panels that make up the altarpiece stretch over 14 feet across and 11 feet tall, and weigh over 2 tons. That's over 4,000 pounds. That weight is comparable to more than 3 Cessna 152s, plus a few passengers, if you're a plane guy, or about the weight of a Ford F-150, if you're a car guy, or about the weight of an adult male elephant seal, if you are an adult male elephant seal guy. My point is, it's big. And it's got a ton of detailed visuals on it, featuring scenes from the Virgin Mary, John the Baptist, Adam and Eve, God the Father, angels, judges, martyrs, saints, and at the center of it all, the adoration of the mystic lamb. This absolute behemoth of a painting was originally commissioned in the 1420s by a guy named WWII, but he usually just went by Use. So Use was a wealthy Flemish merchant, and like many wealthy merchants of the time, Use had some vices, shall we say. During this time, if you were a rich but kind of a bad person, you could commission a large piece of religious art for a local church or parish. In this case, that church would become the Cathedral Bavo, as a way to atone for your sins and display both your humility and your wealth at the same time. Because as we all know, nothing says piety like a 15-foot painting that weighs as much as a Ford F-150. So the Ghent Altarpiece was originally painted by a pair of brothers, Hubert and Jan van Eyck. But because Hubert died several years before it was completed, he didn't become nearly as famous as his brother, Jan. Jan van Eyck became a renowned master painter and expert at fine details and miniatures. And nearly 600 years later, he's still widely considered to be one of the best painters in history. nowhere is Jan's genius clearer than in the Ghent Altarpiece. See, being someone who freaking loved painting extreme details, Jan had some pretty wild techniques he used on the altarpiece. To the extent that some who've analyzed the painting have speculated that his smallest paintbrush consisted of a single hair attached to a handle. And looking at the altarpiece, I kinda believe it. It's an undeniable masterpiece for sure, but it might surprise you that up until recently, these details, along with the real Ghent Altarpiece, were hiding just beneath the surface. Over the years, as the paint aged more and more, it became apparent that something was off about the Ghent Altarpiece. In particular, in the center of the painting, in the panel titled The Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, the lamb was starting to look a little odd. Like, it had 4 ears. In 2012, experts discovered that around 70% of the outer panels of the altarpiece had been overpainted during the 16th century, significantly altering the original appearance, probably because it made it more palatable to the average viewer in the 1700s. Hiding just below the overpainting was the true Ghent Altarpiece. Over the next 8 years, an expert art restoration team slowly and methodically worked to clean away the overpainting. And in doing so, they restored a lot of the original visuals that had been obscured for hundreds of years. And they did a phenomenal job. But they still got some pretty mixed reviews from the public, especially about the restoration of the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb. And that's because some of these original visuals that were uncovered were really beautiful and loved by everyone that saw them, and some were, well, this. Now, this might be the part of the video where I start to get a little unpopular. By all means, click away if you feel fear about what I'm about to say, but for some reason, I love this lamb so much more than this woolly idiot that was painted over it for so long. Sure, it has ears that represent a certain lovable ogre and eyes that can see through your skin all the way to the sins of your youth, but there's something so undeniably raw and human about this guy that it's not even a contest for me. I love it, but if you don't, I would encourage you to leave a number of comments detailing exactly why you don't like it, and if you could make them as short and numerous as possible, it just really helps the algorithm to know how much you don't like it, you know? So they restored the painting, or at least they restored what they had of the painting, because since 1934, one panel, the Just Judges, has been not just missing, but stolen. They put in a replica panel as a temporary replacement in 1945, but it's been a minute since then. More on that later. So suffice it to say that the Ghent Altarpiece has been through a heck of a lot more than just the art history version of a bad TikTok filter in the nearly 600 years it's existed. Like I mentioned earlier, this painting is quite literally the most stolen painting in history. But why? And who was responsible? And what led to its latest unsolved theft becoming art history's most infamous cold case? Without further ado, let's investigate. According to historian Noah Charney, Jan van Eyck's Ghent Altarpiece has 3 claims to fame. It is the most influential painting ever made, the most frequently stolen artwork in the world, and the most desired object in history. Now, personally, I don't really feel like I can speak for the first point because trying to figure out history's most influential painting is a little bit like trying to figure out history's most influential person. It's kind of up for debate. Also, I am super not qualified enough to pretend that I could make that judgment call. But as for the other 2 points, yeah, everybody wanted this thing. In fact, the Ghent Altarpiece was involved in 13 total crimes, 7 of which were thefts, or sometimes elaborate but ultimately unsuccessful theft attempts. So, as the last thing before we get to the cold case of 1934, let's speedrun a couple of the most interesting thefts that led up to it. During the first 130 years of its existence, life was pretty easy for the Ghent Altarpiece. But with the rise of the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, a group of Christians called Calvinists emerged in opposition to Catholicism. Now, Calvinists believed that religious art was idolatrous, so in 1566, a mob of them stormed the very Catholic St. Bavo's Cathedral in Ghent, intent on destroying the Ghent Altarpiece. Church officials acted quickly, dismantling the panels and hiding them in the cathedral's bell tower. The altarpiece remained in hiding for nearly 20 years, only returning to public view after Catholics regained their footing in the area. Okay, listen, I know what you're saying. Technically, this is not a theft. I hear you. But seeing as it was the first time that the Ghent Altarpiece was forcibly removed from the public eye for an extended period of time, a lot of people kind of count it as the first theft. But this theft would pale in comparison to the next one. Remember Napoleon? Yeah, it turns out he was kind of an art guy. The drama started in 1794, about 350 years after the Ghent Altarpiece was created. It was the middle of the French Revolutionary Wars, so Napoleon was doing everything that he could to build up France, especially Paris, as the cultural center of Europe. So naturally, during his military escapades, he confiscated a bunch of priceless art and artifacts from the places he conquered, often under the guise that he was protecting them or liberating them for the good of humanity. Which is coincidentally why I'm filming this video from prison, after a particularly fun day at the aquarium. In my defense, the deep-sea isopods craved freedom, Your Honor. So naturally, in his pursuit of acquiring the best art in the Western world, Napoleon sent his troops to St. Bavo's Cathedral, where they took 4 of the panels from the Ghent Altarpiece: Adam, Eve, the Heavenly Choir, and the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb. These panels were then transported back to Paris, where they were put on display at a recently opened museum that you probably now know as the home of works like the Mona Lisa or Venus de Milo. Yeah, as a huge surprise, turns out the Louvre has a bit of a messy past. The stolen panels of the Ghent Altarpiece stayed at the Louvre until the defeat of Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, after which they were returned by King Louis XVIII to their home in the cathedral back in Ghent. But alas, the troubles seemed unending for the altarpiece, because it was less than 2 years later when the Vicar General of St. Bavo's Cathedral realized that, much like most of us, he was broke. Oh, by the way, if you want to join my Patreon, that would be real cool. So naturally, he did what anyone does when they're strapped for cash: sell stuff. But instead of hopping on ye olde eBay or Facebook Marketplace, the vicar simply stole and then sold 6 of the panels of the Ghent Altarpiece to a kinda shady art dealer, who then sold them to King Frederick William III of Prussia, who put them on display in Berlin. And that's where they stayed for the next 100 years, until after World War I. Actually, during World War I, Germany tried to get the rest of the panels of the altarpiece, but one of the church's custodians dismantled the altarpiece, hiding the panels in the walls and floorboards of the bishop's residence. Very Edgar Allan Poe Beating Heart-esque. And in an awesome turn of events, the Germans were unable to locate them. In 1919, the Treaty of Versailles required Germany to return all looted artwork, including the 6 illegally obtained panels, to Belgium, where they were reunited with the rest of the altarpiece in Ghent. But this was by no means the end of the drama between the Ghent Altarpiece and Germany, because it was time for World War II. Now, at some point, I'm gonna need to do a video just about everything that went on with the Ghent Altarpiece during World War II, but this is kind of a speed round, so we're gonna give just a really short, condensed version. So if you don't know, Hitler during World War II kind of went on this weird art crusade where he captured legitimately thousands of paintings and brought them back to Germany and the surrounding countries and kind of just hid them away and stashed them. And it was really important to him to acquire the Ghent Altarpiece for a few reasons, but perhaps the most interesting of which is that he thought that it held secret esoteric knowledge. Think like the Da Vinci Code. According to Noah Charney, the art historian from earlier, this may sound very silly, but in fact, the Nazis and Hitler in particular were absolutely convinced that the occult and the supernatural were real. And the Ghent Altarpiece was thought to be a sort of mystical treasure map showing the location of relics of Christ's Passion. Remember Indiana Jones? Honestly, not that far off.
Nazis. I hate these guys.
But that's not all. See, Hitler was also a failed painter and art school dropout who wanted to build his own big ol' museum of all the paintings that he thought were the most valuable and important, many of them being from Northern Europe. Because, you know. So in 1940, Belgian officials were attempting to send the Ghent Altarpiece to the Vatican for safekeeping. But the panels were intercepted by a group of Nazis and transported to Germany. Hitler then ordered the altarpiece, along with thousands of other paintings, to be hidden in the Altarpiece salt mine in Austria, where, drumroll please, it was blown up. Or at least it almost was, in a bombing that the Axis powers planned to execute when they grew closer to losing the war. Thankfully, it wasn't blown up, and the altarpiece was rescued in the nick of time by the Monuments Men, a group of Allied art experts tasked with rescuing looted art. After that, it was returned to Ghent in 1945, or at least 11 of the 12 original panels were returned. This, my friends, is where we go back in time 11 years, to where this whole video began. Because by the time Hitler got his hands on the Ghent Altarpiece, it was already incomplete from the theft of 1934, and it'll stay incomplete as long as the mystery of the altarpiece remains unsolved. Finally, we can pick up where we left off, at a mystery so baffling, so absurd, and so quintessentially Belgian that it could only be rivaled by the Great Belgian Cheese Heist of 1934. Yep, you heard me right. Cheese heist. So without further ado, let's dive into the most infamous cold case in art history. Where art theft meets dairy drama, and where investigators tried their best, but all of those efforts just weren't good enough. So it's April 10th, 1934, and two panels from the Ghent Altarpiece were just stolen. The Just Judges and St. John the Baptist. The only thing left behind, as we said, was the statement taken from Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. The note's message hinted that this was a political thing, especially after World War II, but the problem is that this message also kinda stank. Not of cheese, that's later, but like some sort of weird amateur theatrics. Something just seemed off about this threat, and things would just get stranger. The investigation into the theft was, to put it mildly, confusing. No fingerprints or other identifying clues were ever found at the scene, and the note was signed with 3 simple letters: DUA. To this day, no one has figured out what or who those letters or initials stand for. And frustratingly, not a lot of information was released about the case until quite a bit of time after it started. But there definitely seems like something weird was going on from the very beginning. The police commissioner at the time, Antoine Lusterberg, is said to have come into St. Bavo's on April 11th, briefly looked at the altarpiece with its missing panels, and then left pretty much immediately across the street to a cheese shop, where, coincidentally, a theft had also happened the night previously. The theft of a wheel of cheese. Quickly, Ghent's detectives mobilized to prioritize the most important theft. Yeah, they prioritized a cheese wheel over a 400-year-old painting that was so important to Belgium that it had been a key part of the Treaty of Versailles. I mean, listen, I get it. Sometimes my priorities are slightly questionable when it comes to cheese, but like, Really? Unfortunately, we don't have a confirmed reason why Ghent police officers prioritized a missing cheese wheel over a priceless piece of art. But we do know that the 1930s were a rough time for a lot of countries globally. As de Kessel, one of a long line of detectives to search for the missing painting, put it, "Don't laugh, it was 1934. There was an economic depression, and the wheel of cheese had priority." So yeah, with everyone scrambling around looking for a missing cheese wheel, the painting kind of fell out of everyone's minds for a few days. But here's where things get really interesting. See, just a couple of weeks after the two panels were stolen, the Bishop of Ghent received a ransom demand for 1 million Belgian francs. The bishop, Bishop Copetier, wanted to pay the ransom, but the police were having none of it. By then, it had become abundantly clear that there wasn't any real political motivation behind this crime. The thieves just wanted the money. But they weren't going to leave the police hanging for long. In fact, in the third ransom note, the bishop discovered that there was a receipt for a luggage storage station in North Brussels. When the police arrived, they discovered that one of the panels, John the Baptist, was dropped off there by a man who looked like he was in his 50s with a pointed goatee. It was proof that the thieves would make good on their ransom demand. A series of ransom notes followed the first, but although negotiations went back and forth for weeks, the ransom was never paid. Months went by with no leads, and it was beginning to look like they would never catch the thief, or more likely thieves, of the panel at all. Enter Arsène Godetier, a stockbroker by day, a detective fanboy, and true crime fanatic by night. Since the beginning, Godetier had been obsessed with the case, writing letters to the bishop, helping the police every chance he got, and even offering to pay the ransom himself. Which, whoa, that's an insane amount of disposable income to just have lying around. Here, yeah, I'll give you 1 million Belgian francs. But here's the twist. Godetier was the thief. Or at least he would claim to be, because just 7 months after the altarpiece was stolen, Godetier had a heart attack at a political rally. As he lay on his deathbed, he called for his lawyer, and when the lawyer arrived at his bedside, Godetier managed to whisper a short string of words that would change the entire course of the investigation. "I alone know where the just judges are." Arsène was growing weaker, but with his last breath, he just managed to get out. Desk, key, closet, health service folder. The lawyer hurried over, and in the envelope carefully tucked away in the drawer of the writing desk, he found 13 perfect copies, one of each of the ransom notes the police had received. But what many believe to be the most important information is what Arsène said minutes earlier while confessing to his lawyer about the location of the judge's panel. "It rests in a place where neither I nor anybody else can take it away without arousing the attention of the public." Leaving only this clue, Arsène took the secret of the location of the panel to his grave, leaving investigators and art historians scratching their heads for decades. So, where is it? Well, there's a lot of theories, and more crop up every couple of years, because it's still an open and active police investigation. But some of the most convincing theories draw on the fact that Godetier said that the painting was hidden somewhere that he couldn't possibly retrieve it without drawing a lot of attention. So, going off of this, there are a few main theories. A lot of people, including some art historians, believe that the amount of effort required to move the panel made the cathedral itself the most logical hiding place. And it was thought to be hidden in one of the walls or under a floor somewhere. But here's the problem. There have been extensive X-rays of the entire cathedral, even extending to 10 feet underground beneath it. And alas, no dice. So in all likelihood, it's probably not there. So what's next? Well, a lot of people think that it's somewhere close by in the city of Ghent. There have been a lot of different locations nearby that have been dug up, surveyed, or otherwise poked around because of rumors that the panel is somewhere hidden in plain sight. But again, as of yet, nothing. One of the strangest theories by far points to the Belgian royal family. This version of the story suggests that the panel is located in the royal crypt of Albert I, King of the Belgians. Coincidentally, the monarch passed away in the same year the paintings vanished. Officially, his death was attributed to a rock climbing accident in Wallonia, though this incident has also sparked its own share of conspiracy theories. A video for another time. Finally, the big downer. There's a chance that the panel was simply destroyed. With all of the bombing in World War II, if it was in a place that was bombed, it would be nearly impossible to figure out or find any remnants of the panel. However, there are still so many whispers and leads each year that this doesn't seem like a super popular theory. But all of these theories don't even begin to scratch the surface of the hundreds of speculations, tips, and suggestions that the Ghent police have investigated over the past 91 years. The case file, like I said, is still open. A detective is actively working the case, and new leads are being run down every year. And yet, the theft of the just judges remains one of the greatest unsolved crimes in art history. But with greater technology and a frankly ridiculous amount of internet detectives out there, it seems like that might change in the near future. As Noah Charney put it, "I'm sure the missing piece is intact, and I think at some point will resurface. It's just a question of when." People love a treasure hunt, right? And this is the big missing treasure of the Belgian nation. So, if you ever find yourself in the village of Ghent in northwest Belgium, enjoy a waffle, or perhaps a bite or two, or heck, a whole wheel of fancy cheese. But keep your eyes peeled. You never know where you may find a $1 million treasure hiding in plain sight. Thanks for watching. By all means, click away if you feel fear about what I am and what I was about to say. Gosh dang, I needed a little drink of water. Holy cannolis.